I wanted to first start by thanking you for watching this video. We may have had a conversation, or perhaps I left a door hanger there at your door, and it had some information on it that seemed pretty odd. This creative financing thing, you might be wondering if it's legitimate, if it's possible for you. Certainly, is it legal? Well, they're all really good questions, and I'm going to answer those questions. I'm going to do it through a little history lesson. Now, I don't know your age. We're on video. So I don't know if you remember what it was like to go through a real estate transaction back, say, before 1970. So let's say your parents or even your grandparents. Back then, they could have paid $21,600 for a brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bath tract home in Los Angeles, California. You know, um, sounds great now, but even back then, 21,600 bucks was a lot of money. So most folks didn't buy brand new homes. They typically purchased an existing house, and here's the kicker: they probably bought it by just taking over the existing loan. Yeah, they did it because that's just the way things were done. It was absolutely no problem with just taking over the payments. You may stop down to the local bank and introduce yourself as their newest customer and let them know that you've taken over the Johnson loan there on Maple Street. Or you may not have, because you got to remember there was no loan regulation that would tell you to do that. All you had was just a purchase contract with an amount that you were supposed to pay every month, and you did. And that was that. Now, things obviously have changed, and they largely changed in the late 70s. By the late 70s, inflation had gotten extremely out of hand. And Jimmy Carter's new Fed chief, his name was Paul Volcker, he had the idea of continually and repeatedly raising the federal funds rate, which is what banks are charged to essentially have access to money to go ahead and open their doors the following morning to continue to make loans. But Paul Volcker's approach to doing that was aggressive. By, say, July 1981, the federal funds rate, what's being charged to banks, was 22.36%. Wow. So the banks were being charged that much money to stay open. Now, what the federal government expected the banks to do, and of course they did it, they just raised their own customers' interest rates in the loans that they made. But my goodness, the interest rate for a 30-year mortgage went all the way up to 18.63% by the fall of 1981. So, I mean, if you could imagine, say today, if you borrowed $1 million to buy a house, at 18%, you would be paying $180,000 just in interest in 1 year. To have that $1 million loan, 180,000 just in interest. So obviously we're not talking apples and apples, but the reality is things were tough, things were bad. And so what does all this have to do with creative finance? Well, during that time, the Feds just wanted Americans to slow down on their spending, maybe even save some money, They knew that the banks would raise their interest rates. And what's odd is just life went on. During that 4-year period from 1978 to, say, 1981, people still got married and had babies, and families grew, and people got promotions, and other people lost jobs. Some people got bigger houses. Some people lost their houses. In other words, life went on, and people continued to buy houses, even though interest rates were 15, 16, 17, 18%. Because you got to remember, they weren't really walking into banks, and your first choice wasn't to get a loan; it was to take over the existing loan on the existing house. So it didn't take long, obviously, for the lenders to realize that, look, we're not going to be making any new loans here, and that's their business. Why would they, come in and fill out a loan application to pay 15% when they can go ahead and just skip the paperwork and just take over the 7% loan from 1962, And so they did. So what the banks did was pretty brilliant. All they did was they just added a simple clause in their loan agreement, and it was called an acceleration clause. And it gave the banks the option, not the responsibility, not the requirement, simply the option to go ahead and have the funds that were owed to them by their client, the borrower, they could be accelerated. They could be all paid back at the time of sale. In other words, they're stopping the new buyer from paying on that loan, but rather forcing that new buyer to go ahead and get a new loan so that that bank could get back all the money that's owed to them. Today we know it as a due on sale clause. And today the due on sale clause is commonly known and understood as a means for a lender to go ahead and get back, if they choose to, get back money that was loaned out at a lower rate so they can go ahead and get it back and loan it back out today at a higher rate, which is simply arbitrage, which is how banks make their money. So there's nothing at all wrong with that. I would have done exactly the same thing. That little inclusion of that acceleration clause made all the difference. So I bring all that up to say that creative financing, it's hardly creative. It's certainly not new, Lenders have always had the ability to get paid an interest rate, a return on money they've lent. But buyers have always had that same ability and that same right to go ahead and pay directly to a seller. And that's the way it always has been. Now, if the federal government and all the 50 states, come up with a new law that says, moving forward, every American must borrow money only from banks in order to purchase a house. No family members, no leveraging the existing seller, no using, existing loans. You must go through banks. Now, if a law gets passed, well, then that changes things. But obviously that's kind of asinine. That's not going to happen. So that hopefully answers that third question. Is it legal? No. A creative finance certainly is not illegal. That would be kind of silly. But, as long as purchase and sale agreements have an ability for more flexibility, there will always have the need for creative financing in real estate transactions. Now, I got a confession, actually. About 12 years ago, I did look at this whole creative finance, and I passed on it. Back then, the creative finance, what they call today subject to would be one example. They used what were called land trusts, and I have nothing against land trusts, but the essence of the documents back then was that they were trying to disguise a transaction. They were trying to disguise a transfer of deed through the use of a land trust, and I didn't feel good about it. And secondarily, my ego was kind of got in my way as well. I had a successful, real estate brokerage. Why would I kind of muddle in the seedy underbelly of creative finance when my day job was going well? So I didn't. And I got to say, I was about half wrong in taking that approach. I was wrong because I did not extend the services that I could have to a largely unrepresented sector of buyers and sellers, because again, there's always going to be buyers that will not be able to qualify, with the bank guidelines today. There's always going to be buyers, however, that have an ability to make these mortgage payments, and they still have the right, I think, to buy a house if they can. And then the reality, the flip side, is the vast majority of sellers today, they have no idea how much more they could actually net in the sale of their home if they were willing to sell it on terms through time. Again, I was wrong, and I'm not going to make that same mistake. I'll say this: These programs obviously aren't for everybody. I totally get that. But for that small little subsector of our buying and selling public, I'm going to get this information out. Now, you probably know I'm a real estate broker, and my life is essentially contracts. And I would not be able to move forward with this. I would not move forward with this if I was going to do it at the expense of risking my broker's license or my lending license. And I'm absolutely confident now that I'm not doing that. It's taking a lot of different variations, a lot of revisions, attorney review after another attorney review, and a decent amount of money to get these contracts that I have today. But I have about 21 different contracts that reflect different scenarios that folks find themselves in when it comes to buying and selling real estate that I'm absolutely comfortable with. I realize that you probably have questions, and I respect that because I had those same questions. I'm actually looking forward to answering those questions with what I've come to know, because again, the reality is certain subset of buyers and sellers are not going to be able to be taken care of by traditional lending. So I do invite you to go ahead and kind of click on my website. That services drop down. It's Restoration and Holdings, and what you'll find there is some interesting stuff. Like I said, I'm kind of excited to share it with you. I'll leave you with this. I had always had this tagline, because I'm both a real estate broker as well as a lender, that with me, you have options. And I'm kind of embarrassed a little bit because I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I've already confessed I didn't help people that I likely could have had I stuck to it 12 years ago. I'm not going to make that same mistake. So now know this. I genuinely believe this more than ever. Know that with me, you've got some options. So I look forward to having that conversation with you. Thanks so much.